Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Korda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Korda. During this series, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Diocese of Youngstown. And joining me now is Sister Regina Rogers. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
We know that you represent the Ursuline Sisters, but also as part of the anniversary year, you're going to be giving special presentations on religious life. Tell us in a nutshell what that's all about.
My plan is to present the history of religious life, to talk about a number of the communities who have worked in the Diocese of Youngstown. I can use my community as the jumping off point, and then just to muse with the people about the future of religious life and how things have changed since many people see a difference from when they were growing up.
You know, it's interesting because the diocese started in 1943, but the Ursulines and some other communities were present long before that. Talk about the Ursuline Sisters when they came to the Diocese of Youngstown, actually the Diocese of Cleveland,
right,
and what that was all about.
Right. We came to Youngstown in 1874 at the request of Father Brown, who was the pastor at St. Columba Cathedral. And he needed sisters to teach in his school. So we came, and probably 3 days later, we opened the school at St. Columba. From there, we went to Immaculate, to St. Cyril's. In fact, you can see where the nuns would have walked from the Rayan Avenue Convent over to some of these other schools. And in 1905, they started an academy in the convent as a high school for girls. And so that was the beginnings of Ursuline High School. So we've been in the diocese since 1874. And I think right now we are the only mother house that is housed in the diocese itself.
Yes. Let's go back to the beginning of the order. I'd like to kind of talk about that because I think it gives a flavor for the religious community in particular. And so we know that your community from St. Angela Merici,
right.
Talk about the beginnings of that and the history and the charism of the order.
St. Angela Merici was a very popular woman in northern Italy. Her city was Brescia, Italy, and she was known as a holy woman that people would come to ask spiritual advice, to work with people. And one of the needs that she saw was because the area was always at war. You know, Italy was fighting against the French or other groups in northern Italy particularly. And so there were a lot of orphan girls. So Angela reached out to these young women because she basically believed that if you educated wives and mothers, you educated the entire family. So she formed around her a company of women. She didn't call it an order. It was a company of women who lived in their own homes, who had their own financial resources, but went out to meet the needs of the people. And as the years went by, it became particular to education, educating young girls. And from there, we went to Milan under Bishop Charles Borromeo, and then from Milan to France, and then from France to the United States. Okay. So that's basically our travel route.
You know, it's interesting because when you talk about the company of the Ursuline Sisters, that is really unusual in
right.
religious life.
Right.
You know, how is that still celebrated in the community today?
Okay. Well, I think when she talked about it as a company, one of the reasons was so that they could go out and minister. Because at that time, if you were a religious woman, if you were a nun, you were cloistered. And Angela wanted to make sure that her group of followers could be out with the people ministering. So, and one of the things that she taught us that we still use today is to read the signs of the times. Wherever there's a need, wherever you see a need, you need to address that need. So that's why with some of our ministries, for example, HIV/AIDS just celebrated their 25th anniversary. It was a need, and we felt we, in following St. Angela, had to do something about it. So whenever anybody sees something that needs to be done, our outreach to immigrants, for example, is another one. That's how we celebrate our legacy as Ursulines.
Sure. In the last few minutes of our first segment, let's talk about religious communities in general. Isn't that how they really live their life, as responding to needs? Isn't that how the charism really works?
Right. I think that when you look at the history of religious communities, there were those communities that stayed monastic, that stayed cloistered, but there were a lot of groups of women who, in response to the gospel call, saw needs and tried to meet those needs. And they did it in particular ways. We see the Benedictines or the Dominicans or the Humility of Mary or the Notre Dame sisters, looking at what was happening in the society and how they could address those needs. And we talk about a charism as the gift that we give the church. And so how they chose to gift the church would have been their charism.
Sure. Let's, in the last few minutes before we take a break, talk about the particular role that you're going to play. Let's go back to the beginning of our talk for the anniversary. Why is it important to talk during this anniversary year about religious life?
I think because religious life has been so integral to the growth of the diocese itself, the growth of the Catholic population in the Diocese of Youngstown. When the diocese first started, sisters were certainly involved in the ministry of education, and we see that changing over the years, but I think it's a way of celebrating what the sisters have given to the diocese.
Mm-hmm. You know, the other thing, when you were talking about religious women and the sisters in education, that is how many of us, especially those who went to Catholic schools, remember the sisters.
Right.
And but nowadays, as we look at how the church has changed and evolved, and how communities, religious communities in particular, have changed and evolved, we see that in the life of the particular communities. Right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this anniversary year and some of the recollections that you have going back a few years, in particular as it relates to your community.
Good.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. In 1850, a Catholic mission was established in Conneaut, making it the first organized Catholic presence in Ashtabula County. It wouldn't be until 1864 that an actual building was purchased to serve St. Mary Church. 8 years before the construction of St. Mary's Parish Church, St. Joseph Church in the city of Ashtabula was established. Parishes in Conneaut have aligned under the title of Corpus Christi Parish, and in the city of Ashtabula as Our Lady of Peace Parish. There are 11 other parishes in that county that serve over 20,000 Catholics. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. In 1847, the parish of St. Columba was established. It would eventually become the Cathedral Church when the diocese was formed in 1943. It was the first parish in the city of Youngstown and in all Mahoning County. The first church built in 1851 was to be on land in Briar Hill that was donated by David Todd, who became the first and so far only governor from Mahoning County. A second church was built in 1864, and in 1897, the third church was erected on the site of the present cathedral. A tragic fire destroyed the cathedral in 1954, but by 1958, a new cathedral was dedicated, which serves Catholics today. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Sister Regina Rogers from the Ursuline Sisters of Youngstown. Sister Regina, I think what I'd like to have you do, especially in this anniversary year, is to recollect for us your early days as an Ursuline sister. Going back to when you first entered the community, what are some of the recollections that you have?
I grew up in Poland and was a member of Holy Family, so I got to know the Ursulines there. In fact, one of the fondest memories I have is going down to Holy Family School and helping the nuns get ready for school, passing out worksheets and getting the rooms ready. I entered the Ursulines, so when it came time to choose a religious community, there wasn't much choice for me. I was drawn to the Ursulines. I entered 50 years ago. I just celebrated my Golden Jubilee.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So my earliest recollections of my life in community and connected to the diocese was the death of Bishop Walsh. Bishop Walsh died one of my first years in the community, and our community was asked to sing at the funeral. So I remember that. And then, of course, Bishop Malone, a graduate of Ursuline High School, was always connected to the community. When I entered, the schools were certainly the place where we did our ministry. We were educated as teachers, and I spent 2 years at St. Patrick's on Oak Hill, and then I went to Ursuline High School, where I've spent the greater part of my ministerial life, close to 40 years at Ursuline High School. So my connection with the diocese has been through education primarily.
Let's talk about some of the other services and ministries that the Ursulines provide. I know you and I worked together many years ago at St. Joe's in Canton.
Right.
You were Director of Religious Education.
Right.
So talk about some of those other ministries and why they're important for the church.
Sure. We see sisters today in a variety of ministries. I think that is one of the benefits of Vatican II, where sisters got to use their gifts. At first it was everybody was a teacher, but we know not everybody's cut out to be a teacher. So we have sisters today who are in social service. They minister at the St. Mary's Alzheimer's. We have sisters in parish ministry. We have sisters at Beatitude House, I'm trying to think what else we do. Quite a few different ministries. But what we try to do with sisters is say, let's look at your gifts and where can your gifts be best used.
Let's go back to that. I love that idea, because isn't that what church is all about? To find out what can I do best for the church, which is also giving back to God the gifts that God has given me, because not everyone can do the same thing, fortunately.
Right.
So how does one discern what those gifts are, and how do you come to that understanding?
I think discernment happens first by looking at what brings life to me, what's life-giving, where do I have a passion, and is there a need that passion meets? And then I think it's always important that discernment happens among the community also. So sisters will talk with the leadership team and say, this is what I'd like to do, this is why, this is what I'd like to try. We see that in the foundation of the newer ministries, Beatitude House, HIV/AIDS, where they saw a need and they talked with people in the community, and the community said, let's give it a try. Our philosophy has always been start out small and see if it blooms. And if it blooms, it was of God. And so most of the ministries that we have today have bloomed and are really of God.
One of the words that comes to mind when I think of the diocesan church is how important it is to collaborate and to work together. We know that the Ursulines work with other religious communities in a variety of different projects and programs and ministries. Why is it important for us to collaborate as people of God?
I think as we see numbers declining, but yet the needs of the people remain. And it becomes important then. We've been very blessed with the collaboration we have with the diocesan clergy. We collaborate particularly with the Humility of Mary sisters. So that collaboration, we can't do it all. And we can't minister in isolation. So it's real helpful that we work as partners in ministry. And again, it's a sharing of gifts, it's a sharing of resources that really benefits God's people.
You know, let's talk a little bit more about parish life. And in your experience, you've been in the school system for a number of years, but you also have a taste for parish life.
Right.
And in your experience, how has parish life in the Diocese of Youngstown evolved and changed? And how can we best respond to those changes and those particular needs?
Right now, I work part-time at St. Edward's, so I can speak out of my experience at St. Edward's, and I'm very blessed to be there. And I see the parish has changed insofar as it's an older parish now. I think the needs are certainly very different than dealing in a parish where it's a lot of young families with a lot of school-age children. I think we see more parishes being populated by older people as a lot of our younger people move out of the area for jobs or whatever reasons. So I think we need to then begin to say, how can we best help these people transition from full employment to retirement to assisted living? How can we meet their needs in terms of prayer experiences? And finally, how can we help them journey back to God?
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting when you talk about parishes. Our parishes are aging. Our Catholics are aging as well too, and so you know, oftentimes when I help out in parishes, you only see a lot of older people, and that's unfortunate, but that's a reality in many of our parishes. What, in just a few minutes before we take a break, would you like to say to the young people about the church today?
I think the church today offers a home for them in terms of their spiritual lives. I think too often young people today forget that there is another dimension to them, being the spiritual dimension, that, you know, eventually we are all going to be one with God again. And how can we live out the values that we profess? How can we work together to make a world that is good for the next generation? So I think the church offers that base. It offers support, it offers consolation, it offers joy. And I think if young people can see that, unfortunately, I think our young people are pulled in so many directions today that their spiritual life is what gets short shrifted. Sure. They end up not having the time. And I don't believe it's because they don't want to. I just believe that, you know, they have so many other projects that they are forced to deal with. Sure. And I think I see them, for example, I see families that are, you know, both parents are working and they're trying to be good parents, they're trying to be supportive of their children, that they don't take some time for themselves too, both as, you know, individuals or as couples. And I think the church needs to help them address those needs as well.
We're going to talk more about that in a moment, but we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The Catholic Diocese of Youngstown was established on May 15, 1943. 2018 marks the 75th anniversary of the diocese. There are 6 counties which make up the Diocese of Youngstown: Ashtabula, Columbiana, Mahoning, Portage, Stark, and Trumbull. There are 5 other dioceses in the state of Ohio, Cincinnati being the oldest, Cleveland, Youngstown's mother diocese, Columbus, Steubenville, and Toledo. Youngstown is the smallest in terms of area. and the second smallest in terms of population. Yet it has the third highest percentage of people identifying themselves as Catholics. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Sister Regina Rogers of the Ursuline Sisters. I think what I'd like us to do now, Sister Regina, is to have you recollect on some of the people, some of the personalities that you were affiliated with, or that you could remember that were significant movers and shakers in this diocese, that really were significant not only for you personally, but for us as the church.
Certainly I can go back to my early days when I realized that my first love in teaching was theology. And people like Father Phil Conley down at the diocese, Sister Mary Ann Coase in the diocesan library were certainly instrumental in helping me develop that sense of religious education, of theology. I was fortunate enough to work with Father Van Glerick for years, who had a vision of church and school that was very significant to me. I've worked with Ursuline sisters all along who have contributed to my growth personally in the community. Sister Nancy Dawson, Sister Darla Jean would be people that aided in my growth. And I've been very fortunate to work with lay people. Pat Fleming, the former principal of Ursuline High School, Linda Miller, who really have captured the spirit of St. Angela, the essence of Catholicism in their work. So they've been important people in my life.
Now, in the presentation that you're giving to the people of the Diocese of Youngstown in celebration of the anniversary, what exactly will that be all about? And why is it important for us to lift up religious life in this day and age?
My plan is in the talks to start out giving a history. You know, how did religious life come to be as we knew it before Vatican II? What happened during Vatican II, and how is religious life lived out today? Certainly with the decline of religious, many people are not familiar with nuns anymore. They haven't had the experience of working with. I think, again, like you said, in the past, many of us got to know the nuns through the schools. Well, the nuns aren't in the schools nearly like they used to be, so how do we get to know nuns? And why is religious life a worthy endeavor to think about for young women today, or priesthood, brotherhood? You know, why should people be thinking about that? And so I'd like to talk about that a little bit. I'd like to listen to what people are saying, to ask people, you know, what do they see as the needs of the times? Where should sisters be? Because I have to say, my talk is really geared toward women religious. Yeah, I think it would be interesting to have somebody talk about men religious and their impact and their history, but I can only speak from the experience that I know best, and that's with women religious. But that's what I'd like to do, and then, you know, listen to them. Like, we've been very fortunate. The Ursulines have been very fortunate because we have had such support in the Diocese of Youngstown from the people that we've worked with, that we've ministered to. So I'd like to recognize, you know, that in terms of the lay people today and how supportive they have always been and how necessary that has been for us to continue to do what we do.
You know, it's interesting because we refer to the Ursulines as the Ursuline Sisters of Youngstown,
right,
because you are a diocesan order, correct? Explain how that is.
Well, we're really a pontifical order. We're a pontifical order. The Ursulines are all over the world. However, the governance of the Ursulines in the Youngstown area is done by the Ursulines of Youngstown. The same is true for the Cleveland Ursulines or the Toledo Ursulines. We're all united under St. Angela, but our governance is in that specific locale. That's the difference.
In the one where you had mentioned in the presentations that you're going to talk about and present, it was Vatican II. We know that with Vatican II, many things really changed. And we believe, most of us, for the good.
Right.
And change really is the only constant thing.
Right.
Things are always
Right.
changing. Why is it important for us to embrace the Vatican II, which is just a little over 50 years old, that's leading and directing and guiding us through the Spirit, and how will that continue to guide us not only as a diocesan church, but as women religious?
Vatican II called religious women to go back and look at their roots and really strip away what wasn't necessary, what wasn't vital to their lives, and look at the real motivation for our lives. So we went back and studied our founders. We went back and looked at our original charisms. And from there, that was the springboard for a lot of the changes that we made. We needed to look at our lives and update them because they really had been frozen from around the Council of Trent. And so for us, it gave us a chance to say, is this what we should be doing? And I think it's true not just for religious, but it would be the same that married couples need to say, let's look at our life together. Are we doing what we initially wanted to be doing? And so the Ursulines, as responding to Vatican II, we did. We looked at all of the aspects of our lives, our life in community, our life in ministry, our prayer life. That all was open to reflection, prayer, reflection, dialogue. We went back to the writings of St. Angela. So it was a time that was important to us to say that we are doing what St. Angela asked her daughters to do. And all religious communities took that charge very seriously. And I think you can see some chose to do things differently than other religious communities. But I think one of the things that people always talk about is that's when we did away with the habits. But the habits weren't what made us who we were, and we needed to. In fact, St. Angela's daughters did not wear a habit, so we decided that we needed to look at the purpose, the meaning, and again, some communities chose to keep the habit, some chose to modify the habit, some chose to do away with the habit altogether, but it depended upon the community. We looked at our prayer styles again because we were trying to live a monastic prayer schedule and yet be active at the same time. So, you can see the difficulty that would cause. So if prayers were at 5 o'clock, but you were a DRE and had meetings, it presented a problem. So we had to adjust. Wasn't easy, it wasn't easy for us, but I can honestly say that as we prayed, as we talked together, the decisions that we made were the best decisions that we could make under the guidance of the Spirit at the time.
Well, Sister Regina Rogers, thank you for spending this time with us and for your work with the anniversary year in the presentations. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Korda.